The Root of Nightmares is a beautiful, beautiful place full of whatever this stuff is. Let's traverse this massive raid as we make our way to Nezarec. Spoilers, Nezarec is the final boss, in case you didn't take that hint from the strike. The first encounter is your introduction to the main raid mechanic, the Field of Light and Flux of Darkness buffs, although in the first encounter, you will only be dealing with Field of Light. Team composition should be heavily focused on enemy slaying, as the majority of what you'll be doing in the encounter is killing tons and tons of enemies, including barrier champions and tormentors. Any sort of infinite suspend type builds that you may have on your respective class will do quite well here, as well as your typical enemy slaying builds. If you have what you think is a good enemy slaying build, it's probably going to be good here. Starfire Warlocks, any sort of Shadow Shot Hunter, Strand, Stasis, you name it, it's probably going to work here. If Bungie keeps the Season Artifact perks as crazy as they are as I'm writing this, then be sure to use them to their maximum effect here. I found the machine guns to be incredibly effective in Season 20 thanks to their very generous ammo. During our contest mode clear, I had 1,906 machine gun kills. As for primary weapon kills, I had 30, and I did not use my primary a single time in the second half of the raid. In Season 20, use a machine gun if you aren't fighting a boss, but I suspect even without the Season 20 artifact perks, machine guns will still rule this place unless they receive a nerf of some kind in the future. On harder difficulties, or if you are struggling with tormentors, you may want to use Divinity with Izanagi's Burden to take them down quickly. Pop their shoulders, tag them with Divinity, and then hit them with an Izanagi shot. With regards to champions, remember that they are very susceptible to suspend, making them pretty easy to deal with. There are two mechanics to know in this fight, the Field of Light buff and Tormentors. From the moment you start this encounter until it's over, you are debuffed with Sweeping Terror. If this timer ever gets down to 0, you wipe. You increase the timer by 30 to 35 seconds by killing Tormentors. Tormentors spawn every time you kill 2 Scions in those bubbles, noted by the Pain Calls Forth a Tormentor message in the feed. We've seen these bubble Scions a few times before, like in Leviathan, and also Leviathan, but in Season 17. While you don't need to assign anyone in particular to the role of killing Scions, you can absolutely do that if you think it'll help your team. This is just a constant thing you'll need to monitor during the entire encounter. Tormentors will spawn either on the left or right side of the arena, assuming you are facing the main direction you'll be progressing in this encounter. Next is the Field of Light mechanic. This is what will push you forward to the next phase of this encounter, with there being 4 phases total. The mechanic works like this. At the start, you'll be presented with a floating orb above a plate, which is surrounded by a big glow, or aura, whatever you want to call it. Shooting this orb while this aura surrounds it gives you the Field of Light buff, which enables you to activate a new orb on a different plate. Shooting an orb without the aura does nothing. This first orb will shine a beam of light in the direction of the next plate that you need to go to in order to activate the next orb in the sequence. Go to this next plate and shoot the small orb. This will turn it into a bigger orb like the one at the start. However, this will consume your Field of Light buff, and you'll need to go get a new one. You get this new one by going back to a previous orb, usually 2 orbs behind where you are in the sequence. For example, the second orb will require you to go back to the first, because that's just the earliest one you can go to. The third orb will also have you go back to the first, because now you are 2 behind. And the fourth orb will have you return to the second, the fifth to the third, etc. The orbs do not have a set order to them, but they will generally progress in a logical manner based on how they are laid out. For example, the second and third orbs are generally pretty close together, so the game will send you to one of those 2 second in the order, as opposed to sending you across the entire map and then having to come all the way back. There are 4 batches of these orbs, each designating a phase of this encounter. Once you do a batch of these orbs, the game will respond with His Hatred Halts as it prepares the next batch of orbs to shoot. The orb sequence will always start on the right and will progress towards the left. Let's take a look at an example. This mechanic sounds confusing, but once you see it in action, you'll get it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I just want to try and get a lay of the land here for these final ones, because they just fell all over the place.
I'm going
really simple. This last
Yeah,
one
and then just turn into a web.
What? One spawned on me.
Looking. Oh, I see him. I'm going.
Okay.
I have red Scion.
First one immediately
Okay.
behind. I'm just gonna sit right here, Sneak.
Left Tormentor.
Yep, I see it.
Coming.
Tap this one,
Both
and then just
passes.
go
Anti-bear
right
is
here.
also up here. Also, anti-bear is also up here. I'm throwing Nova.
Yeah, it's that one. Oh,
Yeah, I already got
He
it.
went behind
So
the
just come
thing. He
here.
went behind the thing. He went behind the thing.
We gotta kill
Follow him,
Tormentor,
follow him,
guys.
follow
He went to the
him.
right.
Yep,
No,
yep,
he went
yep.
to the right.
Next one's underneath.
I got him. I got him.
Good job, good job.
Hold on.
Got it.
Normal way. He went around.
Yeah, he actually just hit
Go
from
back.
Scions are up. Get that one, Rowan. I got the far one.
A side note, these orbs can despawn, although the reason is not exactly clear just yet as to why. It seems that dealing too much damage will cause the orb to break and despawn for several seconds, or that trying to get a buff while someone still has one may also break it. Regardless of why it broke, you must wait for it to respawn and then also fully regrow into a proper orb before you can use it again. It is best to only have 1 or 2 dedicated people dealing with this mechanic at a time. To use the advice of my high school band teacher, you want to help? Don't help. Let the person who is assigned to the role continue to do the mechanic unless they become unable to continue for whatever reason. While this mechanic feels like it is designed for 2 people in mind, many teams have found success using only 1 person for this mechanic, leaving 5 people to deal with enemies and tormentors. If you do end up using 2 people, then my advice is to make sure to rebuff every single time you want to create a new orb, as using an old buff will not work. For example, if myself and someone else buff under the same orb and they go to shoot the second orb in the chain, even though I still have my buff from the first orb, I still need to shoot the first orb again to refresh my buff to go get the third orb. Using 2 people can make things go a little bit faster, and I suspect some groups will opt for 2 people in normal mode strategies since ad clearing won't be as big of a problem, but the benefit of 1 person doing it by themselves is that they don't need to make any callouts, and that it's not really a big deal to only use 1 person for this mechanic. Everyone else, you are killing everything that shows up, and there is non-stop killing to be done. Drop wells, drop wards, crowd control if you think you need it, which I don't think you really will, machine guns, make as much power ammo as you can with Finder and Scout mods. You are here to do nothing but kill enemies for about 6 to 8 minutes. Positioning does not matter too much as long as you can see and rotate to tormentors quickly. The only issue you may run into are tormentors in phase 4, as they spawn on top of a building on the left and right, and they can be a little difficult to see. Let's take a look at the fight in action before we move on to the second encounter.
Scions.
Never mind, I'm good.
Scions again. I got 1 Scion.
I got the other.
Okay. Or
Tormentor, right side Tormentor.
20 seconds, everybody,
It's the one next
please.
to end. It's the one next to end.
Tormentor,
well.
Tormentor. Divs up.
Everybody, 10 seconds, Tormentor.
Tormentor, Tormentor.
Why are we disrupted?
Nice. I almost have a well. As soon as I spawn up, I should have a well.
We need orbs.
Give me 2 seconds. Well, up top middle.
It's Scions.
20 seconds.
We gotta go.
I don't think I see
Scions.
any. I don't see any.
You guys gotta figure this out.
It's last. It's literally last.
Do you have field of light? Do you have field of
No,
light?
it's last, but it's right by me.
13.
10 seconds.
10
Just
seconds.
get in, run. You get 10 seconds.
third top middle.
Plenty time. Plenty time.
Oh,
Plenty
come
time. Plenty time. Plenty time, baby.
The second encounter elaborates more on the Field of Light mechanic, adding on the Flux of Darkness mechanic, which is exactly the same thing as the Field of Light mechanic, except it's orange instead of white. That's about it. In the encounter, you'll be progressing up multiple levels of the raid area while killing enemies and activating orbs. The main mechanic is the Field and Flux, with a minor mechanic in shielded enemies. In terms of team composition, you should more or less keep the exact same composition you had in the first encounter. Pretty much nothing needs to change, as the majority of the people in this fight will be doing more slaying. The following is the strategy my team ended up using in our first clears, and the strategy that becomes the most popular may be a little different. Split your group into teams of 3 dark and 3 light players. Of those 3, 1 person is going to be your gap crosser, your orb person, whatever you would like to name them, while the other 2 players will be slaying out. Each orb runner will have a set path that they must run to complete the entire chain per floor, which involves using the launchers to go back and forth across the area. The fight starts with everyone in their respective group in the aura to receive the buff. The reason getting the buff is important for the Slayers is because periodically, and then at the end of a sequence, you will have enemies that can only be damaged by people with the Field of Light or Flux of Darkness buff. Therefore, it is a good idea to stay near the orb when your orb runner is coming back, as they will tap the orb for the buff that they need to progress the fight, while the Slayers get the buff they need to kill the enemies that they need to kill. Otherwise, Slayers stay on their side and continue to heed my high school band teacher's advice until instructed otherwise. Meanwhile, the orb runners will be launching back and forth between both sides, progressing the orbs much like the runner in the first encounter did. The only things that should hold you up here are learning the locations of things you must shoot and the launchers themselves. My only experience using the launchers in a significant way was on a warlock, and I often experienced times where the launchers would not launch me far enough and I would plummet to my death, or I would fall to a lower floor. On rare occasion, it launched me up too hard and I would go too high up, but dropping down is not as bad as trying to climb back up. As a warlock, I significantly increased my chances of survival by launching myself and immediately double tapping my jump to ensure that I had the height that I needed to make the gap. Other things you can do include using grapples to ensure your safety, along with bringing an eager edge sword as a backup in case you need some extra distance. As an orb runner, I ran eager edge to help with my movement in other parts of the fight to accelerate the process, as the orb runner's job is 99% running and 1% combat. Here's an example of the runner's job. I start at our first orb, activate the buff, and then launch to the other side. Don't forget that the orbs tell you exactly where your next orb is in the form of that beam of light. However, because the positions of these orbs never change, you'll get them memorized over time. I activate the next orb and then run back to the launcher and rebuff at the original orb. This is also where I tell my team to meet me there so that they can get buffed with Flux of Darkness so that they can damage the shielded enemies. From here, I continue the process with the next orb directly in front of me. The biggest mistake you will make here is not going back for another buff. Make sure you always rebuff yourself. Continue hitting orbs in the proper order, and eventually the imminent expulsion debuff will go away. This is a debuff that you get at the start of the encounter, and if it expires, you die, meaning you only get 2 minutes per floor to complete a cycle. You will then spawn enemies that can only be damaged with the proper buff. If these enemies start spawning before the orb runner gets back to the proper side, one of the two Slayers can activate the final orb for the two of them and start the process of killing the enemies. On contest mode, these enemies died pretty easily, so I imagine it'll be even easier on normal mode. From here, you launch your team up to the next level and repeat this process for another 2 floors. The sequence is pretty much the same, down to how often you will get launched, but the locations of the orbs you need to shoot are slightly different. I'll let the video play so you can see what the fight is like. If you've had enough, skip to the next chapter marker.
Don't do all 3.
What do you mean?
Alright. Somehow that worked.
He did it.
Yeah.
Go.
Sneak up. I'm gonna start doing them sneaky since you're down low.
I'm coming up.
Okay, I got your help, I guess, no lie.
Yeah.
If
My
you're over
sword
there sneaky,
decided
just
it
start
so.
on that side, and then you can do the rest.
Okay.
Backside darkness.
Yup.
We love a good backside. I'm going for the thing. Kill my lads. They're all frozen.
Trying to kill
Darkness
them.
done. There's a fat boy on the left.
Tell me when you grab next light start. I want shield thing. Good bubble.
I'm hanging out at middle darkness. Awaiting buff.
Nice,
I'm
good.
en route.
We got 2 guys behind us.
Yeah, I see them.
Hope you guys got it.
We're good.
Anti-barrier right
I'm
side
going
also.
up top header.
Okay. Just helping clear ads.
Yeah, there's a barrier coming to y'all. I'm getting this.
I'll help. A second.
Yeah.
No buff again on right.
I got. Nope.
Gladiators.
We don't have a. Be careful, this guy's. We don't have a buff.
Yeah, we
for
don't
this
have a
guy.
buff. You're right.
Okay,
We're
we
good.
can grab buff now, I think. Right, Datto?
Grab
Go ahead and
last.
grab it.
Yeah,
Go ahead
yeah,
and
go
grab
for it if
without
you
me,
need
I'm
to.
getting Heavy. Oh, he's not even back yet. Cool, we're good.
I'm here. Nano, get in here.
Good shit.
I'm already
Red's
like
dead.
killing
He's
everything.
already got it, so.
Okay.
We ride.
Oh boy.
Let's go.
Don't send me.
Yeah.
This next platforming sequence involves the Field of Light buff, in addition to a new buff called Darkness's Refuge. Every so often, a giant shockwave will expand out from a tower in the distance, and this shockwave kills you if you do not have Darkness's Refuge. You get this buff by having the Field of Light buff, which you get from shooting the Light Orb, then shooting the Dark Orb. The goal here is to chain these back to back as you run as a unit, hopping from node to node. However, this is not a darkness zone, so a lot of groups simply were stumbling through this or sword skating through it. These are the main rules you need to know in order to progress through this area, which has a tiny bit of combat, but is not considered an encounter. The third encounter, probably my favorite, uses none of those mechanics at all, instead opting for brand new mechanics altogether. The goal of this encounter is to move planets to their correct spots, and then move planets to damage plates in order to activate them to deal boss damage in a caretaker-style manner. Team composition should resemble that of a boss damage setup, so wells and wards are encouraged, along with good boss damage weapons. My team opted for Thunderlord with the Catalyst and Divinity, as Thunderlord with Divinity basically means you never need to stop shooting, and it's an easy to execute strategy. The boss does have short burst windows for damage, so going for an old school G-Horn plus Rocket plus Izanagi hot swap setup will do pretty well here too, where you equip an auto-loading rocket, shoot it, swap to Izanagi, shoot a big shot, reload, and then swap back to your rocket. The damage windows are short, but you get multiple windows per damage phase, similar to Caretaker. Also similar is the chunk of health you're able to deal damage to per plate, as the boss will trigger a short immune period when hitting that health marker as you move to the next plate. On the left and right sides of the room are 6 planets, 3 per plate, for a total of 4 plates in the room, 2 plates per side, that's 12 planets total. We assigned 1 person per plate, with 2 flex players in a Slayer type role pretty much the entire time. I was on Divinity and as a result played a Slayer role, mowing down stuff with a machine gun since I wasn't using it for boss damage. Above the boss before you start is a light planet and a dark planet. This signifies where all planets must be placed by the end of the phase, and that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now, so let's make it make sense. To get to the part where you move planets, we must kill Centurions to then spawn Colossuses. Colossi, start the fight, and keep a lookout for the second wave of enemies that spawn in, which will contain 2 Centurions, one for the left and one for the right. Killing a Centurion on the left will trigger the Colossus spawns on the left, spawning 1 Colossus per planet plate, and the same for the right side. It is only after you kill these Colossus that the planet moving process can begin. Be aware that Scion will drop down from the left and right side walls onto these planet plates. They go down easy, but they can sneak up on you if you're not paying attention. Again, the 2 flex players not assigned to any sort of planet shifting should be slaying out hard here to ensure the safety of future planet shifters. If you get the killing blow on a Colossus, you will get the Planetary Insight buff. Planetary Insight allows those with the buff to see which planets need to be moved where. All players will receive the Planetary Shift buff, which has a short duration indicated by the timer underneath it. Planetary Shift allows you to move planets. On the left side will be 4 light planets and 2 dark, and on the right side will be 4 dark planets and 2 light. You're probably seeing where I'm going with this, where the 2 dark planets on the left need to be moved to the right, and the 2 light planets need to go from right to left. My team used a 1 through 6 number system to mark each planet, going from closest to the rally flag to farthest away. So let's come up with an example. You get insight. What do? Simply call out which planets on your side are the ones that need to be moved. The other person with insight on the other side will call out the planets that need to be moved on their side, and then you swap them. An example call out might read like so: 2 and 6 left side, 3 and 5 right side. 2 and 6 left side means the player on the plate with planet number 2 grabs planet number 2, and the player on plate number 6 grabs 6. For the right side, 3 grabs 3, and 5 grabs 5. The number 2 planet will drop their planet into the 3 slot on the other side, and 3 drops it into 2 on the other side. And the 6 player will drop their planet into the 5 slot on the other side, and 5 into 6. Technically, you can slot a planet anywhere, like 2 could have been dropped into 5, but my team preferred to keep 1, 2, and 3 paired together, and 4, 5, and 6 paired together, so that there wouldn't be any crossing over.
Of it, right? On DPS?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, so...
Alright, the Centurion's playing Ring Around the Rosie with me.
The guy's upright, more.
Might need help on left side.
2 and 4, 2 and 4 on right.
Okay. It's 3 and 4.
Careful, boss is kind of roaming.
If this is done correctly, then shortly after this process, you should see the message, the indexed planets reveal themselves. If you don't, that means you still have some planets that need to be aligned, or maybe someone messed something up. If that is the case, repeat this process, but keep in mind that you don't get too many tries at this. Most teams will get 2 chances to properly align the planets before a wipe may be triggered due to poor alignment. If you do align properly, the planets will reveal themselves, aka you can start prep for the damage phase, which involves moving more planets. After killing the Colossus, Planetary Insight will again go to those who got the kill. This time, the 3 planets in the center of the room will become light or dark. You now need to take planets from the left and right sides and dunk them into the plates that the planet corresponds to. In this example, we have 1 light and 2 dark, so any light planet can be picked up and dunked in the left plate, while both dark planet players pick up any dark planet and dunk them in the middle and the right. Note that it won't always be 1 light, 2 dark, it can be 2 light, 1 dark. I never saw 3 of the same, but I do suppose it technically has a chance of happening. If this is done successfully, then a damage phase will start shortly after. Dark plates will glow orange and light will glow white. The boss will glow either orange or white. If the boss glows orange, then you need to step into an orange plate to deal damage, and white with white. Stepping onto this plate will give you a field or flux buff from previous encounters, but the buff here simply allows you to deal damage to the boss. This buff lasts about 7 seconds, but it seems like it can be refreshed. You do not need to technically stand in the plate to damage the boss, you just need to touch it to get the buff or refresh it. Plan to well in between plates to double up on your well time. After you use all 3 damage phases, the process starts again. When you reach final stand, there will be a brief delay before you can resume damage, but this process is the same as a normal damage phase. Step on a plate and burn the boss before you die. There is no reason to hold back. Finally, we come to Nezarec, what is likely to be one of the fastest final boss encounters that the game has ever seen. Team composition should again spec for boss damage. The amount of health on this boss is so low that there have been teams that have used Rat King to kill him on contest mode. Rockets and Izanagi will work here, Starfire Protocol Warlocks will have a good time with that. My team again used Divinity with Thunderlord, and 2-phased Nezarec on contest mode. I think there's some talk of people using Legend of Acreus on this boss, potentially bringing back slug shotguns. The door is wide open here, but I will say that, unsurprisingly, a Well of Radiance is really going to make your life easy here. Chances are, as long as you bring some half-decent guns, you're going to do just fine here. I would also bring some Aeon gloves just in case you run into ammo problems, which you might. The Nezarec encounter is short and hectic. The Field of Light and Flux of Darkness mechanic is brought back for a final time, and if you thought Rolk was aggressive, meet Nezarec. The goal of this encounter is to enable all of the orbs on all of the plates to make Nezarec vulnerable. To start, assign 1 player the Field of Light orb role, another the Flux of Darkness orb role, and everyone else is more or less on guard duty, killing enemies and controlling Nezarec's aggro. The area will be littered with constantly spawning enemies and Colossus, which should be finished for power ammo if you have an Aeon player on your team, if that ends up still being necessary when you're watching this. A Waveframe grenade launcher is making very good work of a lot of the Cabal here. The Field and Flux players have one job: light up all of the orbs on their side as fast as possible. This is done exactly how it's been done in previous fights, with all the running back and forth. Once this is done, damage starts. The problem is that you only have 1 minute, technically less, to do this before Nezarec will wipe your entire team. The solution to this is that if you have good enough movement, you are able to get both sides done in less than 1 minute, thus getting to completely ignore a central mechanic to the fight. We'll still go over this mechanic anyway, just in case. And here's an example of this mechanic being completely ignored because we were fast enough to get to a damage phase before a wipe.
Let everybody know.
I'm watching a slideshow right now.
Blue.
That's a base. I'm gonna try and finish left.
Watch out.
Hatred on Nano.
That's
Cool.
not good.
We'll just be
Hatred
up
on
here for a while.
Speaking.
He do be hating.
I'm trying to take for you. I have it.
I wish you luck.
Yeah, it's... Oh my god. Adds mid. They're tethered, so kill if you can.
Gonna bust.
I'm trying to bust too.
Runs busting.
Busted.
Busted.
Damage,
Coming.
damage. Adds middle on your way in, please kill.
Dead, dead.
Watch void, incoming, stay alive, stay alive.
Go
Stay in the
bubble,
bubble.
go bubble.
Yeah.
Alright,
Safe
damage,
bait.
damage, damage.
So let's say you're not fast enough to make that happen. Then what? This is where a third role comes in, and that is the boss handler. Nezarec gets pretty annoying in here with his Void Blade attacks and his constant booping of players. Nezarec has 2 weak points on his shoulder, along with his chest. Shooting his shoulders will cause him to burst, and this burst will be a certain color, blue or orange. Keep note of this color. His chest will then be vulnerable, which you can shoot to stop the boops and get his attention while he's on the platform. Once he drops down into the arena, this attention becomes much more aggressive, and it is a wise idea to trade aggro with another teammate every 10 seconds by shooting his chest, which is how long you hold his attention after shooting him in the chest. If you remember the Darkness's Refuge situation from earlier, this is where the don't die to the wipe mechanic comes into play. You can survive the wipe mechanic by having the correct refuge buff on you when he casts his wipe attack. If the burst from hitting the weak points was orange, that means you are going to need the Darkness Refuge. Blue is Light Refuge. In order to get Darkness Refuge, you need someone to get Field of Light and then shoot a Darkness Orb. Light Refuge is the opposite, Flux of Darkness buff, shooting a Light Orb. Remember that you need to be right next to the orb in order to activate it. This will spawn a pool under the orb that gives the corresponding refuge buff once stood in. Note that the orb you shoot cannot be the one with an aura glowing around it. It needs to be an inactive orb. Also note that just because you got this buff doesn't mean you guarantee not dying when the attack goes off, because if you do this too quickly and your buff falls off and you don't refresh it, you'll still die to the attack. So don't stray too far from the buff just in case you need a refresher. My team usually did this buffing process after about 4 or 5 orbs, and we usually called an audible as to whether or not we actually needed it, depending on how quickly or slowly we were going with our orbs. Here's an example of this mechanic in action.
What the?
That's toxic.
Man, we lack the FPS diff knowledge, okay? Well, no,
I mean, that's actually
Oh,
not
I like the
that's
punch,
true.
dude.
we're putting that in. We're putting that in the notes.
I mean, I just got hit 3. Okay, what's
I'm
the color?
trolling, of course.
I got hit 8 billion.
Blue.
Are we making a safety net?
We are.
Okay, I'm coming.
Aw, we're here.
Where it needs to be. Oh, yeah.
Add mid. Dead.
Watch out, no lie.
More mid.
I'm suppressed.
Don't get your buff if you don't get your buff.
Gonna
Oh, you're
rebuff.
just eating it. Alright, we should
Get
really get out.
out.
Get out.
Let's say you make it to a damage phase by some means. What you'll want to do is gather on a predetermined plate. The one that you're seeing in this footage is a pretty good one. Drop your wells and wards, whatever you got, and get to damaging Nezarec. Usually the start of damage is indicated by a giant laser beam hitting Nezarec and him yelling, but sometimes this doesn't happen and it'll just start, so tap with primary ammo to detect when he's actually taking damage. While you're on the plate, he won't really be able to get to you, and instead will just kind of swing around, do charge-up attacks that don't really do a whole lot if you're standing in a well, and teleport in and out. Watch out for suppression effects from slam attacks though, you don't want to lose your super. After about 30 seconds, he'll become immune, and the whole thing starts over again. Once you get him to final stand, I think you know what to do at this point. Burn everything you have and get him dead. This fight can go really quickly with good runners, and you can completely ignore the immunity team wipe mechanic as long as you're fast enough. Congratulations on your clear, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.